Okay, Mayor, over to you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, it's 1 o'clock. I'll call today's meeting to order. We have an agenda in front of us. Does anybody have anything they would like to add to the agenda? This side? Okay, just a motion to accept the agenda as presented, please. Councillor Narang, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Okay, we'll move on to our delegations. We have 3 delegations today. We'll start with the first one, which is Mr. Jim Stelfox, and it is regarding open pit coal mining. So I will look for Mr. Stelfox on the screen here. Welcome, Mr. Stelfox.
Good day.
Good afternoon. Maybe I'll start with a round of introductions of our council.
Okay.
We'll start on my left.
Councillor Marin Fraser.
Councillor Dave Auld.
Councillor Randy Brown.
Mayor Tammy Burke.
Councillor Len Phillips.
Councillor Michelle Narang.
Dean Kraus, Town CAO.
Thank you.
Renee Hartling, Legislative Services Clerk.
And we also have some other directors in our room as well. Do we introduce or? Yeah. I guess I'll do that since I have a mic. Mr. Dean Schwader, Mr. Rob Shanks, Ms. Betty Quinlan, and Mr. Wes Ament. So I'll turn the floor over to you now, Mr. Stelfox, and I'll just remind you we have you on for 10 minutes with your presentation, and then that will allow us for time for questions.
Okay, appreciate that. So I'll share screen now.
Yes, that's great. And we do have the presentation right in front of us.
Okay. Okay, well, the presentation is self-explanatory. It's about open pit coal mining in the Eastern Slopes region and some of the issues that siltation and selenium pose for the salmonids that are present in the area. A bit of background information regarding myself. I worked for Fish and Wildlife for 35 years, managing the fisheries in the Eastern Slopes west of Calgary. My dad, David Stelfox, was born and raised in Rocky Mountain House and was one of Henry and Janet Stelfox's 9 children. And the influence that my father and grandfather had on me by introducing me to the outdoors was a factor in my decision to become a fisheries biologist. Since the 1950s, I've spent a lot of time in the Rocky area with my parents, siblings, relatives, and friends, fishing, camping, hiking, canoeing, hunting, and building a cabin by the Clearwater River. And when I'm not recreating in the Eastern Slopes, I'm often working on our pasture west of Rocky, where we've been conducting rotational grazing for 50 plus years. Just a few pictures showing some of the various activities that I've enjoyed in the West Country area, west of Rocky Mountain House. So siltation, selenium, and salmonids. Salmonids, that's the family that contains the trout and whitefish, which we have in the West Country area. Salmon are also in there, hence the name salmonids comes from that. One of the salmonids that's present in that area is cutthroat trout. This is a cutthroat trout from the Ram River. Incidentally, this is downstream from one of the proposed mine sites. The other trout out there is bull trout, which is native to Alberta. It's also Alberta's provincial fish. This is also a bull trout caught just downstream from in the Ram River, just downstream from the one of the proposed mine sites. And bull trout are listed species in Alberta as well. Mountain whitefish, one of the most abundant salmonids we've got in the West Country area. It's also an important food source for bull trout. When bull trout become large enough, they feed heavily on mountain whitefish. So keeping an abundant supply of mountain whitefish in the rivers is important. Siltation, it's something that affects salmonids by suffocating their eggs and reducing their food supply, and which is the aquatic invertebrates. It can also have extremely negative effects on the other invertebrates that are in the system. So this is a picture that's not a very good quality one, but it shows some of the sediment plumes in Fallen Timber Creek at the Benjamin Creek Road, which have come in from an OHV trail after a light rain. As you can see, the OHV trail is not a particularly steep one, so erosion's not as bad as it occurs when you're into some of the steeper country. But this was just after a light rainfall. You can see the clear water upstream from the sediment source, and you can see the silty water downstream. And once you get below the bridge, the whole stream is all turbid. So if a light rainfall can cause this much siltation in the stream, can you imagine what happens when the berm at a coal mine, settling, or tailings pond fails? Richard Quinlan, a co-worker of mine, is a habitat protection biologist for the Fish and Wildlife Division in Edmonton from 1982 to 1989, and he could certainly answer that question based on his experience. When Richard visited the site of one spill to collect water samples, he found that sediment had so completely filled the creek that there was no surface flow. He had to go 50 meters below the spill site where surface flow resumed in order to collect a water sample. In this case, despite the magnitude of the siltation, the coal mining company was not prosecuted because a senior official in Edmonton stayed the charges. In fact, of the approximately 20 investigations that Richard undertook, none of them resulted in any of the coal mining companies being fined. Was the lack of fines a contributing factor in the massive spill that occurred at the Coal Valley Resources Incorporated Obed mine? You may have heard about this. CVRI had no prior convictions, but had received administrative penalties for sediment releases at another of their open pit coal mines in 2010 and 2013. Catastrophic failure of one of the berms at CVRI's Obed mine in October 31st, 2013 resulted in 670 million liters of fluid mine waste and 90,000 tons of sediment being dumped into Appodawan Creek, Plant Creek, and ultimately the Athabasca River. Incidentally, some of the species present in these waters were endangered Athabasca rainbow trout, threatened bull trout, Arctic grayling, and mountain whitefish. And the primary cause of the berm failure was the water level in the containment pond was allowed to exceed the permitted level by more than 5 meters, resulting in the berm, which was 20 meters high, being overtopped and washing out. The amount of material released when that berm failed was so great that it washed out trees downstream from that point and knocked over power poles. Selenium, it's a naturally occurring element, vital in small amounts, but toxic in excess. Water quality guidelines for selenium are 1 part per billion in Canada, and in Alberta, 2 parts per billion. Below Tex mine, where selenium levels higher than 100 parts per billion have been recorded, the population of cutthroat trout, adult cutthroat trout, declined by 93% in the Fording River over a 2-year period from 2017 to 2019. Selenium levels higher than 40 parts per billion have been recorded below open pit coal mines south of Hinton. And the provincial government knew that selenium levels exceeded water quality guidelines in at least 15 years, for at least 15 years, but did not report anything after 2006. The selenium levels from the downstream samples exceeded those considered safe for aquatic life by nearly 4 times in the Greg River and nearly 9 times in Luscar Creek. Despite this, the companies were not required to do anything to try to remove selenium from the water and to reduce the threat. Reduced survival and for deformities of rainbow trout have been documented in waters below the open pit coal mines south of Hinton. Lemley points out that provincial and federal regulators have failed in the past to guard against selenium contamination. High levels from existing coal mines in Alberta have failed to produce regulatory action, he writes, although the problem has been known for more than 2 decades. A 2006 provincial report found that selenium was already harming fish. As well, a 2005 published study co-authored by provincial scientists found rainbow trout were suffering facial and skeletal deformities from selenium. The last time Alberta Environment reported on selenium in the 3 waterways was 2006, 15 years ago. Using data collected in 2000 and 2001, it concluded Selenium concentrations in rainbow and brook trout were usually greater than toxicity effects thresholds. Environment Canada. Environment Canada's databases show no fines for selenium contamination to existing Alberta mines have ever been issued. Selenium has a strong ability to bioaccumulate and biomagnify, that is, to progressively increase in concentration as it is absorbed from water by primary producers, which are plankton and algae, and passed on up the food chain through successive trophic levels, culminating in greatest concentrations in the tissues of fish and wildlife. The province's 5-year monitoring program plan shows stations on 2 rivers and Crete polluted with selenium from coal mines were mothballed. This is south of Hinton. That was despite more than 2 decades of readings that Alberta Environment Guidelines suggest should have led to closer attention. The only station still operating is on the McLeod River, about 200 kilometers downstream of the old Cheviot mine. I guess if you don't want to identify problems, the best way is to not look. Jason Nixon has stated that Alberta has world-class environmental regulations. However, this is of little benefit if the regulations are not enforced. And as you can see by the preceding slides, that's pretty much been the modus operandi. Who do you think will end up paying to operate the water treatment plants for decades after the coal mines have closed and the companies have left our province with their profits? This picture's worth 1,000 words. There's also the major problem of calcite deposition and receiving waters as a byproduct of coal cleaning, which coats the stream bottom and, in effect, turns it into concrete that is uninhabitable by invertebrates that form the base of the aquatic food chain and also eliminates the loose gravel necessary for fish spawning. Simply put, the risks greatly outweigh the gains from open pit coal mining in eastern slopes. What do you want for our future generations? This or this? The decision that Albertans need to make is a bit like Scrooge in A Christmas Carol, who wakes up from his nightmare and realizes that the future doesn't have to be that way, provided that he is willing to change. The question for Albertans is, do we have the will to change? Do we want to leave the land and water better than we found it? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, Mr. Stelfox. I do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
You're talking about open pit coal mining. I have a question regarding underground mining. Is there a safe type of mining?
Underground mining doesn't have as much of an impact, obviously, on the visual impacts, but they still have to wash the coal. And the water that they use to wash the coal is then stored someplace. And the problem is that that water, which contains selenium as well as heavy metals, ends up ultimately leaching downstream. And in many cases, these storage ponds, settling ponds, end up failing. And that's the biggest problem with coal mining in these relatively steep areas in the mountains, as opposed to if you get further east in Alberta where you've got the thermal coal, they don't have the same risk of settling ponds, tailing ponds failing.
Okay, thank you. And I have another question about the current coal policy committee. Are you confident with the representation on that committee?
I don't know whether it's so much confident with the representation. There are a few people that I have confidence in, but as you're probably well aware, they have made it very clear that water and land use is not to be discussed. Well, how can you possibly consider seriously what sort of an impact coal mining would have in the eastern slopes in the West Country area if you're prohibiting the committee from taking into consideration the impacts that the open pit coal mining could have on the water and on the landscape and land use?
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions? No? Okay. Any? So I'll ask you one more then.
Sure.
Are there any areas in Alberta that could be considered as safe and appropriate for coal exploration and development?
I would suggest that to the east of the Highway 1 would be the more appropriate, sorry, Highway 2, east of Highway 2 would be more appropriate. You're not dealing with the steep slopes. You've got more potential to be able to safely store the tailings, wash water, tailings ponds and stuff like that. But when you get to the west of of Highway 2, and you especially get up into the West Country area, the Eastern Slopes, then you're dealing with a multitude of problems. And in the Edson Hinton area, speaking with the fisheries biologists that worked up there, they had so many spills, and in many cases these were intentional spills because it was easier to let the spill occur as opposed to spending the money on trying to sort of clean up the water that accumulated in the settling ponds. It was easier to let the spill occur, and since they pretty much knew from experience that charges were unlikely to be laid, and if they did get laid, the fines would be so small that it would be less than what it would cost them to deal with the problem. That's why I don't have much confidence with open pit coal mining in the Eastern Slopes.
Okay.
If I might
Thank
add to what Jim just said as well, once you get past the Eastern Slopes, the type of coal out there isn't metallurgical coal, it's actually thermal coal. The coal quality degrades quite a bit, so you can't use it for what these proposed mines want to do with it and send it to China for coking coal. So it's a completely different type of system as well. And thermal coal, as everyone, or most of you might know, is being phased out in Canada is for thermal power. So there's not much point in going out that way currently as well, with mines such as the Highvale mine closing, which is a thermal coal mine. Thank you.
Also, I'd like to add, and as you'll see in Colton's presentation, options exist as far as using that will hopefully eventually make metallurgical coal obsolete. You can make steel by using hydrogen without having to use coking coal, metallurgical coal. And so this is something that's going to, in the next few years, become more prevalent, and it will make the use of metallurgical coal obsolete. But the damage that's caused by getting the metallurgical coal, that's going to last for hundreds of years.
Okay, thank you. I have another question from Councillor Auld.
Okay.
So correct me if I'm wrong, the biggest issue that people have against the coal mines is the wastewater and how that wastewater is stored and processed, correct?
That's one of the biggest issues. Selenium, especially, all you have to do is look at what's happening over in the Elk Valley area in BC. But the siltation that occurs, the frequency and severity of settling ponds failing, the berms failing and washing downstream, and the impacts that has had in the area south of Hinton, it's pretty clear that this is something you can expect to happen. And unfortunately, nothing seems to happen to the companies. There's really no incentive for them to prevent this from happening because they seldom get charged. And if they did get charged, the fines are minuscule.
So if there was a process where the tailing ponds weren't used for the storage, that'd mitigate a huge part of the concern?
I guess the question would be, where would you put the billions of liters of water that are used to wash the coal after they have washed the coal? It contains selenium, it contains other particulate matter, heavy metals. Where is that going to be stored? There's a huge amount of material that has to be stored once they've washed it. You can't just release it directly into the stream. That's clearly not an option.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a question from Councillor Fraser.
Okay.
So I've been looking through specifically the Teck mine, and there appears to not be technology or techniques to return the land and the water to its previous quality if there is an accident. Is the damage that gets caused permanent, or is there technology that I'm missing?
As far as the land is concerned, obviously it's like Humpty Dumpty. You can't put them back together again. You might be able to do things to try to get grass and other things to grow in that area, but it'll never look like the mountain did before you altered it through coal mining. But when it comes to the selenium, as you're probably aware, they've spent almost $1 billion trying but failing to resolve their selenium problems there. There's a number of things that they're trying as well. They're hoping to be able to remove 95% of the selenium, but the problem is that, as you'll see in Colton's presentation, even if they're successful in removing that amount of selenium, they will still be releasing selenium at a higher level than the water quality guidelines, and the impacts on fish and wildlife and people downstream is still going to occur. So really, the technology has not yet been proven to be able to resolve the selenium problems. And there's little reason to believe when the coal mining companies tell you that they've got this all in hand and they're going to solve the problem. If that was the case, then I'd like to have them point out where, in fact, this has been successfully employed and they have resolved the problem.
Okay. Well, it looks like we don't have, oh,
One more.
Councillor Auld, sorry, I thought you turned your light off.
Sorry, do you know if there has been any recordings up to this time on, say, the North Saskatchewan River as for what the parts per billion are right now, currently?
For selenium, no, I don't know. I would expect that it should be extremely low. I mean, as you know, selenium is present in the environment, but it's when you break open the mountain and you increase the surface areas on the rocks, the overburden that's removed, that the selenium ends up being leached out of the area and coming downstream. Some people have suggested, well, gee, the selenium's already present in there. How come it's not a problem? Well, it's just because you haven't broken it up and exposed it to the environment and the water and the leaching.
That's where my question was. It just, with, say, for the Ram River, for example, it runs through the chutes where the coal is all right on top of the ground. I was just curious whether there's been any monitoring to this point so we know where we're baseline is.
I'm not aware of it, but I'd be very surprised if it was above the water quality guidelines. You'd probably be looking at something that would be about 0.5 to 1 part per billion would be my guess.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Stelfox, for your presentation. As I said, we've all read this before as well, and it's great information, and we appreciate you taking the time to bring this to us.
Well, thank you for taking the time to hear me.
Thanks.
Bye.
Okay, have a good afternoon.
You too.
Okay. So we're going to move on to our next delegation, and that will be from Mr. Colton Vesey. Hi, Mr. Vesey. I assume you were online and you have had, you heard all of our introductions before, or do you need them again?
No, that's all right. I heard them already. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming to present to us. And we do have your presentation in front of us, so I will turn the floor over to you.
Sure, I'll just share my screen. Great presentation. All right, so yeah, thank you, Council, for having us this morning, I guess this afternoon. So I'm going to talk more about the details on the environmental impacts of coal mining, kind of relating to what Jim was talking about as well. So a bit of my background. I'm currently a PhD student at the University of Alberta in the Earth and Atmospheric Sciences Department. I specialize in a field called environmental geochemistry. In particular, I study the mobility and transport of contaminants, so selenium, arsenic, different metals in the environment and natural and also mining systems. I also have experience in mining reclamation and closure strategies, particularly up in the oil sands. I have my master's and bachelor's of science, geological sciences from the University of Saskatchewan. And I'm also registered geoscientist training with the Associated Professional Engineers and Geoscientists. So coal mining is historic, and it's important to recognize that, especially here in Alberta. And I think it's also really important to recognize that we need resources and we need mining is really important to our society and globally. But it has to be done in an environmentally responsible way and kind of what I would consider the right resource, which is up for debate what that could be. So Alberta has been producing metallurgical coal for quite a while, since the 1960s, I believe. But it is a small portion of the total export from Canada. The bottom graph on the right shows in 2019, I think we exported around 40 million tons. Most of that actually comes from BC, the Teck Resources mine in southern BC. And as many of you know, there were policy changes to the Coal Policy Act, where it was rescinded, but it was recently brought back in February, I believe. But there's still open pit coal mining projects on Category 2 lands, or at least exploration projects going forward. Most notably the Aries mine and the Valerie Resources, and then the Grassy Mountain Coal Project and the Tent Mountain Coal Project down in the Crowsnest Pass, which are technically on Category 4 lands due to historic mining practices, but they do encompass a small portion of the overall footprint of those proposed mines. And with coal mining, there are lots of considerations, especially long-term water quality, quantity, wildlife, and community effects that need to be considered. So, as you know, metallurgical coal, it's used for the coking process to make steel, usually done overseas in China, India, and in Europe as well. But it is one of the major greenhouse gas emitters. It emits around 4 to 7% CO2 emissions, which is quite significant on a global scale. And because of that, there are alternative methods coming online. Electric arc furnaces have been around for a while, and they use less coking coal or can use alternative resources, such as reusing old steel and other resources that reduce its emissions. And as a stat that I provide here, it's predicted to grow from around 10% to around 45% in China alone by 2050. And that's over the lifespan of these mines here in Alberta, and the main export target is China, I believe, China and India. And there's also hydrogen-based steelmaking or direct reduction processes that are online currently in Europe and are scaling up even further in the next couple of years here. So kind of what I'm more familiar with and what I specialize in is environmental implications of mining and open pit mining, and also underground mining. There's lots of considerations as well. So as you know, there's many historic examples here in Canada and globally. In Canada, the BC Tech Valley, Tech Resources in the Elk Valley, and also what Jim went through here with the Cheviot and the Obit Mountain mine. So it can generate different types of mine drainage. Typically in Canada, we're expecting neutral mine drainage, which has different types of contaminants or constituents that we're concerned about related to pyrite oxidation. And in Canada, what we're expecting, or at least in the Eastern Slopes as well, is selenium and sulfate, which comes from pyrite oxidation when you remove that overburden and that you enhance the weathering, and also nitrates associated with blasting agent that they use in high quantities to dislodge coal and overburden. And there's also potential for arsenic mobility. There are a couple papers done in Tech Resources looking at arsenic. It's not an issue currently, but I mean, there's always the possibility it needs to be considered as well. And the reason why these are a concern is because of the many examples of selenium bioaccumulation in wildlife. There have been quite a few pictures and examples shown around recently, mostly around spinal deformities and native fish species like cutthroat trout or missing gill plates on the right there. And it also can manifest as reproductive issues in mammals and wildlife and migratory birds. This is an example from in Southern California, where they had a selenium issue with agricultural runoff and poor management at the time, and it resulted in a lot of migratory bird die-offs associated with extreme brain protrusion from reproductive issues. So Tech Resources, as some of you are familiar with, it's a historic mining site now. It's been going on since the 1960s, and they've had water quality issues since around the 1980s, 1990s, where selenium concentrations have exceeded 100 parts per billion is generally higher than 20, which is the regulatory limits around 2 parts per billion. Nitrate, typically around 35 parts per million, where the regulatory limit's 3 parts per million. And colleagues of mine from the University of Saskatchewan, who I've worked with and have studied the waste rock dumps at Tech, they found and predicted that pyrite oxidation, the main source of contamination, could occur for up to 300 years. I mean, you got to take that with a grain of salt, though, because that is a maximum value, and that could change depending on the remediation strategies or just naturally over time. But it is decades into the future. As Jim pointed out, so Tech is working on some technology. They invested $45 million into an on-site water treatment facility. Unfortunately, they had issues with it initially, and it resulted in releasing more organic form of selenium, which is more toxic and bioavailable, and resulted in the 93% die-off in 2018, I believe. And they were levied fines of $1.4 million for that. And more recently, they had that $60 million fine from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. They are doing research and development on different strategies, though. The most prominent one is what are called saturated rock fills. Essentially, they have an open pit and they backfill it with the waste rock, and they put contaminated water in it, pump contaminated water through it, and add nutrients in the form of carbon source, usually methanol or something else, and that allows microbes to grow, and they can actually naturally remove selenium and nitrate at elevated concentrations quite efficiently. But as Jim mentioned, into the future, this is from one of their full-scale tests using saturated rock fills and their long-term predictions into the future. The long-term prediction is hanging around 20 parts per billion, which is quite a bit still above the 2 parts per billion water quality guidelines. So while it is new technology and does working quite well, it's not a silver bullet. There is no silver bullet when it comes to water treatment and reclamation, and you usually have to use multiple methods in line to reach water quality guidelines. And it takes time for these to reach equilibrium and remove these constituents into the future. And there's questions around how long you have to maintain these sites as well. And more recently, Teck has noted they've seen cobalt and nickel concentrations where cobalt's above the water quality guideline and nickel is not far behind it, but they have noted that they've seen potential effects on the local insect populations, which are a direct food source for local wildlife and fish. Here's some details about the Benga mining project. I won't go into too many of them. It is a smaller footprint, but this is just one mine, and there's potential for 5, 6 or more of these mines to be in the eastern slopes. And at that point, you have to consider cumulative impacts, not just one mine, but all of them together. And they're currently budgeting around $59.6 million or around $60 million for their reclamation costs. And $20 million of that is for continued operating costs 25 years after the mine. And I think there are questions around whether that's enough to maintain these sites into the future. And that doesn't include a full-scale water treatment facility if they do need one, where Teck spent $45 million on their own water treatment facility that needed upgrading. And one other thing I'll point out is that they assume in their environmental impact assessment that they'll remove around 99% removal of selenium, whereas Teck sees 95 and assumes 95, and that seems like a small difference, but it could manifest into quite large differences in concentrations downstream of different contaminants. There are many comments I have here, and I won't go through them all. I think most notably, though, is you have to continually add chemicals and a carbon nutrient source for the microbes to grow and actually remove the contaminants. And I think there are questions along how long in the future do you have to add those, and how do you close these systems to actually reclaim them and move them back into the natural landscape and ecosystem post-mining. And then it's also quite costly to do that as well. Another important consideration as well, kind of playing along with what cumulative impacts are, is water usage and withdrawal. As Jim pointed out, these mines are very water intensive. They use a lot of water for washing coal and has to be stored on site. In the Aries mine alone, if you kind of work it out, or if you assume 250 liters of fresh water per 1 ton of coal, which seems to be around the average, can be more, can be less, depending on the coal and the area. But that works out to be around 3.1 billion liters of water per year. And these mines will go for about 25 years or so. And combining that with low precipitation in southern and central Alberta and competing interests, water interests for agriculture, local use, and natural ecosystem needs as well. And as well as climate change that could impact the number of droughts and the length of these droughts as well into the future, could have long-lasting impacts. And there have been a few opinion articles released on that as well. And so just to finish off quickly, there are many considerations that have to be taken into account when doing these open pit mines or underground mines as well. And they have different needs depending on the type. There has to be talk about cumulative impacts. And I recently had a good chat with Dr. Brad Stelfox and Mandy Olsgaard on Ryan Jesperson's Real Talk show, where we talked about cumulative impacts of coal mining and where there needs to be more research done into this. And had a good chat with them afterwards as well, where we came up with some ideas on where this needs to be put forward. And as well, there's also need to be considerations of holding these companies liable for reclamation into the future. The Mine Financial Security Program, which is the Alberta Energy Regulator's way of attempting to do this, I don't think they do a very great job. I'm not a policy person, but there's been lots of articles talking about how the MFSP doesn't require full financial security deposits up front, which is worrying, but they can also put paying into this if their asset liability ratio is greater than 3. And they can also self-report their total reclamation costs. And I think there needs to be better accountability there on the Alberta Energy Regulator's side, and also holding these companies liable up front. And Quebec and Yukon actually have much stricter regulations, and they do this as well. So with that, I'll end my presentation and I'll take any questions. And thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you. Speaking on securities, what would that look like now currently, and how would that be beefed up that would be better?
Yeah, I think just that is holding these companies liable to actually post bonds up front before they break ground. So they'll do their environmental impact assessment, and if it moves forward, they'll have an estimated reclamation cost. And then based on that, the other provinces like Quebec and Yukon require them to actually post that amount of money, and the government will hold that money until mining is complete, and then they'll get it back once they've reclaimed the site, which is a much safer way of doing that. And that way, if these companies go bankrupt in any way, or the market collapses and there's no economy around coal or other resources, they're still held liable.
Okay, thanks. I have a question about the circular economy. Is steel considered, or is it part of the circular economy? Meaning, can a greater focus be put on recycling steel?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say I'm an expert in that, but they're like the electric arc furnaces that I talked about earlier. They can reuse old steel, and that cuts back on a lot of operating costs and as well as greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Fraser?
I just had a question about the technology that's being used to make steel without the coking coal. I guess what percentage of the countries that are making steel are adopting these technologies, and which ones are not?
That's a great question. I don't think I fully know. I provided that statistic earlier in the presentation where electric arc furnaces are predicted to grow from 10% to around 45% in China alone by 2050. The 10% was for 2019, I believe. I'm not sure what other countries are currently doing, but I believe they are looking at expanding alternative methods and greener methods and moving away from coking coal.
Thank you.
Okay, does anybody have any other questions? On this side, no? Okay, well, thank you very much, Colton, for taking the time to come and present to us today, and we appreciate all this information that you have given us.
Great, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to 3.3. Our third and final delegation is Ms. Brenda McKenzie. Welcome, Ms. McKenzie. Did you hear all of the introductions in the first two presentations?
Yes, I sure did.
Okay, so we're good there. And I'll just remind you, we have you on for 10 minutes, so that leaves us some time for questions. So I'll turn the floor over to you.
And it's gonna share my. Can you see that?
Yes, we can. We also have your presentation in front of us on our own devices.
Yeah, mine might be a little bit different now that I've done a little editing, but nothing worth worrying about. I wish to respectfully acknowledge that the land on which we gather is Treaty 6 territory and a traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous people whose histories, languages, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant community. We recognize the land as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territory we reside on or are visiting. I've been a longtime resident of Clearwater County, about 35 years. I live west of Caroline and work in Rocky Mountain House, and I'm here today to share my concerns about the proposed underground and surface coal mining mines in our county of Clearwater. Here you'll see the coal development policy map with the 4 different categories. What I'll be talking about today is in this blue area, category 2 land, which is the most coal mines in category 2 lands in Alberta are in Clearwater County. Premier Lougheed had a vision for our eastern slopes when it came to industrial development and a single resource coal. Albertans overwhelmingly said the eastern slopes should be dedicated to watershed protection, recreation, and tourism in spite of any potential economic benefits. The policy protected the headwaters and the downstream water supply for Albertans. There has not been a coal mine approved in category 2 land since the coal development policy was introduced in 1976. The idea of protecting the eastern slopes is 40 years in the making. In 2007, a coalition of nearly 10,000 ranchers, landowners, and environmentalists wrote a letter to the Stelmach government for a timeout on development in the eastern slopes. The coalition stated sacrificing renewable resources, threatening ecological integrity, and creating a future economic and ecological debt is not in Alberta's best interest. The NDP had announced the Bighorn Country proposal in November 2018. The $40 million in provincial funding was to be spread over 5 years for operations and capital infrastructure. The eastern slopes had long been recognized for the need of legislative protection other than coal, which was protected, we thought, by the coal policy. According to a poll in 2019, 73% of Albertans supported the government of Alberta to protect the Bighorn Country. These are some of the proposals that were included in the Bighorn proposal, from hunting, fishing, off-highway vehicle use to hiking, horseback riding, skiing, and areas for industry. It was estimated the entire process would have taken 5 or more years to complete. The biggest opponent to the Bighorn Country proposal, other than possibly Robin Campbell, the past Alberta Minister of Environment and now President of the Coal Association of Canada, appears to be the MLA of Clearwater County, Jason Nixon. Nixon attended the town hall meeting that the NDP held in Rocky Mountain House and was very vocal in his criticism. Stephen Legault, a wildlife photographer, stated, because of the hysteria fanned by the UCP, public meetings have been and can be expected to be taken over by thugs, and I no longer bother going, nor do I suspect do most decent people. The UCP came into government in April 2019. Nixon was sworn in as Alberta Minister of Environment and Parks on April 30th. 6 days later, on May 6th, without any public consultation, Nixon canceled the Bighorn proposal. Nixon stated in regards to the NDP proposal that, quote, "It was the worst consultation process that I've seen." Minister Nixon met once again with Robin Campbell, the president of the Coal Association, on September 17, 2019, to discuss the economic opportunities of coal mining in the eastern slopes. Remember, the coal policy was not rescinded at this point. 3 weeks later, on October 11th, after the meeting with Campbell, Minister Nixon and Minister Furr met with Valerie Resources, an Australian coal mining company holding a large amount of coal lease applications west of Caroline, all around Corkscrew Mountain. He told them Alberta is open for business 8 months before the coal policy was rescinded. Here you'll see the letter that he wrote thanking them for their meeting. 5 months later, in March 2020, once again without any public consultation, the Minister of Environment and Parks, Jason Nixon, announced the proposed removal of 20 parks and 164 sites from Alberta's park systems. 1/3 of the total sites are in the areas that had potential coal mining interests of the existing Australian coal lease applicants and the Coal Association of Canada. Before the coal policy was rescinded, there was approximately 65,000 acres of coal lease applications in Clearwater County. After the coal policy was reinstated, there are 361,000 acres of coal leases, from about 406 quarter sections of land to now 2,262 quarter sections of coal leases in Category 2 lands in the Clearwater County. Approximately a 554% increase in coal leases in the 8 short months that the coal policy was rescinded. Thermal coal versus metallurgical coal. Coal lease applications are in limbo. They're not denied or accepted. Coal leases are coal lease applications that have been converted or sold and have a 15-year exclusive rights to the holder. Who owns our West Country? After the coal policy was rescinded June 1st, the UCP contacted all the coal lease application holders to convert their active coal leases by paying a nominal application fee and $3.50 a hectare. So from the existing and the new coal leases that they sold, that's just over $500,000 would have been the cost for the 2,262 quarters of leased land in Clearwater County. That is less than $227 per quarter section of land. Although the coal development policy was reinstated in February, the UCP never returned the 406 quarter sections to coal applications or took back the 1,856 quarter sections of coal lease that they sold in the interim. All these coal leases are now active leases for 15 years. Who owns our West Country? Australian Coal Mining Corporations. This is a Capital Investment Partners. They're an Australian finance company that has been promoting that they're more than willing to help finance any Australian companies that are interested in buying coal leases in Clearwater County. Valerie Resources held a large volume of coal lease applications, and they're the ones that Minister Nixon and FIR met with in October 2019. They presented to the town of Rocky Mountain House on June 9th, 9 days after the coal policy was rescinded. They were proposing to surface and underground coal mines west of Caroline by the Corkscrew Mountain. The Clearwater River, the North Saskatchewan's main tributary, runs through some of the coal leases. Valerie applied for exploration permits and is believed to have received them approval. Coal exploration involves extensive clear cutting of roadways and drilling sites, building kilometers of roads, drilling tens, maybe hundreds of core samples, possibly leaving each of the pipe casings sticking out of the ground. This opens up wildlife areas that once provided protection from predators and human encroachment. Here you'll see the Ram River Coal Corp, and in the middle area, the darkened area, that's where their mine would consist if this is to go through. The Ram Aries mine is expected to extract 12.7 million ton of coal per year. The water required to wash coal is 1,000 liters per 1 ton of coal. Out of that 1,000 liters, each wash requires 250 liters of fresh water, where they'll use 750 liters of recycled. After each wash, that water is now contaminated and used as recycled water for the next wash, with an additional 250 liters of more fresh water added. To wash 12.7 tons of coal, 3.17 billion liters of fresh water will be destroyed each year. That is enough fresh water for over 13,000 families or 52,000 people. Water that is used for human consumption is treated and returned to the river or water source. The contaminated water from coal mining is not, unless this poisoned water leaks or leaches from the retention ponds, which is very common, into the rivers and creeks that provide Rocky Mountain House and other communities further down with fresh water for human consumption. Remember, this is only one mine. Oh, and how much does this Australian Coal Mining Corporation have to pay for the 3.1 billion liters of fresh water each year? Nothing. Zero. The water is free. The royalties they pay will be pennies on a ton. It is important to do our homework when we talk about jobs in the mining industry. This is not the old days when the coal mines employed a community. Globally, the push in all mining is for automation. We only need to look to the north at Alberta's oil sands to see the implementation of automation. Teck coal mines in the Elk Valley just received their own dedicated 5G network, a clear indication they're also on their way to automation. The argument is for the safety of the workers, but the bottom line is to increase profits, taking the human out of the equation. Australian mining corporations being front and center behind automation. This includes automated trucks, drills, even the train that hauls it away. The Rocky area is very fortunate in that we have been blessed with a multitude of natural resources such as oil, gas, and forestry to draw from for economic diversity. The geography provides opportunities for agriculture, greenhouses, solar installations, geothermal development, and as the town of Rocky Mountain House promotes, it is where adventure begins. All of the four corridors in Alberta to the Rockies, ours is of all of them, ours is the least developed in Alberta. People come from all over the province, the country, and international destinations to spend quality time in our backyard. Development of tourism is a golden opportunity that will continue to bring more and more people to spend time and money in Rocky Mountain House. This long-term sustainable investment will surely be lost if the decision is made to open pit mine our mountains. In fact, I believe we will lose many of our residents who live here now. We live in one of the most beautiful areas in the world. We need to protect it and ensure it remains that way. As Lauren Finch, a professional biologist from Alberta, recently stated, the Eastern Slopes are a gift that we will not be given twice. Here you'll see a list of the towns, cities, municipalities who have contacted the UCP government and voiced their concerns about open pit mining. It appears that 70% of Albertans agree with Mr. Finch. Edmonton, Calgary, Red Deer, Clearwater County, the Ochies, First Nations, just to name a few. The population of Alberta that are represented by the various municipalities that have voiced their concerns over open pit coal mining are First Nations, 25,000, cities, towns, municipalities, 3.1 million of the total Alberta's population of 4.4 million. 71.2% of Alberta's total population has been represented. I hope the town of Rocky Mountain House joins the majority of Albertans. Here, I wish for the town of Rocky Mountain House and Council today to consider making a motion for council to draft and send a letter to the Alberta government in regards to the town's position on open pit coal mining. Here are some of the concerns I feel that need to be addressed. We, as the residents of the Clearwater County and Rocky Mountain House, are the keepers of the West Country. We are the first and last line of defense for the Eastern Slopes in this area. Since before Alberta was even a province, the Eastern Slopes have been recognized as one of Alberta's most important resources, as it is here where the headwaters lie. The very headwaters that provide us not only us, the residents, with high quality, clean, healthy, fresh water, but also for so many other Albertans. We are blessed to live here and need to stand to protect these vulnerable lands. Of all the water on earth, there is only 3% fresh water. Of that 3%, there's only 1% that is accessible. No to coal, period. Water is life. We have a choice to make, and the choice is ours and lies in a lot of the power of our governments to represent us. Here you can see the mines out west of Rocky Mountain House, and here was the Bighorn Wildlife proposal that included land use. Yeah, I can't find the right word, but I'll just leave that. The provincial government clearly demonstrates an intentional lack of transparency when there's no public consultations before they secretly rescinded the coal development policy that protected our Eastern Slopes for over 40 years. The UCP set the precedents and appears to continue to play it out by trying to pacify Albertans after the fact with coal consultations that they have engineered and manipulated to yield the government's preferred conclusions. And there is one thing that has brought Albertans together like nothing seen before in the history of our province. That is the threat to our beloved mountains and West Country. Albertans are standing between their own government and the Eastern Slopes. I encourage the Council of Rocky Mountain House to do the same. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, Ms. McKenzie. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Narang?
Hi there. I just have a quick question because the focus seems to be on open pit mines. Do you think that there should be a more targeted focus on mining, coal mining in general in the Eastern Slopes? Like, do you think that focusing on open pit leaves a little bit of leeway?
Well, open pit mining is for metallurgical coal. And so that's what the Australians want. So they can export it to Asia through trains from the Strachan Spur line there and east or west rather to the ocean. So I know they're not interested in thermal coal. Basically, Alberta is not interested in thermal coal because they switched our power over to natural gas or are trying to do that. So to say, yes, that we can work around somehow, the only reason that they want our coal out west is for metallurgical coal for export. And so that means open pit mining, and that means poisoning our water. So
thanks.
Any other questions?
1%.
No? Okay, I don't have any questions either.
I do. Can I ask a couple questions? Am I allowed?
Sure.
Okay. First, I'd like, I would just like to know what is the town's position on the open coal mining? Because I don't know if you guys have made a public announcement on how you're feeling.
Actually, we're going to be discussing this later on in our agenda.
Okay. And the other thing is, I'm just wondering how many emails that you've received in concerns to the coal mining proposals.
I haven't kept track, but we do post any emails that we get in our correspondence for information in our agendas. So on all of our agendas, under correspondence for information, you will find all of the emails that have been sent to us. The ones that were sent to us this past weekend are not in this agenda package because they did not make it in time to be in this agenda. So they will go on our correspondence for information in the first council meeting in May.
Okay, so you're saying that all emails in favor or for or against are on that then?
Correct. That's right.
Okay.
Unless they're anonymous. We aren't posting the anonymous letters.
Okay, yeah, because I know when we were at Clearwater on March 9th, they said they were receiving hundreds and there was only 2 that were in favor of coal. And I'm just, yeah, I'm interested to know for this far, how have you been basing your, or what have you been basing your information on of where your stand has been so far?
We haven't taken a stance. As I said, we're going to have this discussion further on in this agenda, actually, in about 5 minutes after we're done with your presentation.
Okay, yeah, because I just heard that, yeah, no, I'll just leave it at that then. And I appreciate your all listening to me today and taking the time to hear my concerns, and probably a lot of Albertans I could probably represent too on that one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. McKenzie, for taking the time.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
take
you.
care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, you too.
Okay, so we'll move on to 4.1, the draft of the regular council meetings from April the 13th. Does anybody see any concerns on that, on the meeting minutes? Okay, council's wishes. Council Fraser?
I will move to accept the draft minutes from the April 13th meeting as presented.
Okay, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. How's everybody doing? Do we need a stretch before we go on, or everybody okay? Okay. So then we will move on to number 5, delegation business. So, yeah, does anybody have any discussion around that? Any more discussion? Councillor Narang?
Yep. I was just wondering, I should know this, but did Clearwater County send a letter and did they share it with us? Do we have a copy of it?
Yes, actually, I did. It was in their agenda package. I don't have it with me, but it is in their agenda package, and they just sent one. So, I do believe that we should make a resolution to send a letter, and I do have some. Does anybody have any other discussion around this? Councillor Phillips?
Just the discussion, if we're sending a letter, what are we putting in that letter? That's
And I
the
have it written
discussion.
down.
Okay.
Yeah. So I also saw in Clearwater County's agenda package a letter from Ochees First Nation, and they have not been consulted. So I do think that there should be some conversation around First Nations consultation, because I don't think that we're going to get very far without First Nation consultation either. So I would like to see us have extensive consultations with the public, First Nations, and industry, and just to make sure environmental impacts, including land disruption, water quality, air quality, and potential health impact to both humans and wildlife, and a cost and benefit analysis encompassing employment in the industry, economic revenue, effect on tourism, and potential recreational development. So that's what I would be inclined to. Councillor Brown?
I'd just like to add that the province needs to step up enforcement of ongoing activities at this time.
Okay. All right, Councillor Ald.
Just going back to when we had that meeting with the provincial government, and they basically said that everything was kind of at a standstill. They hadn't consulted with the First Nations because they weren't at that stage. Nobody has finished their applications. It almost seems like it's more of a stop the horses before they even open the gate is what everybody's going for. I agree, we need to definitely have that consultation with everybody. We need to make sure everything's done properly. But I honestly think everybody's got a fear about this before they have any plan.
Councillor Phillips.
I agree on those comments. There's a lot of fear going on right now. And, we have to look at both sides of the equation on this. Yes, are there some concerns that need to be looked at from an environmental point of view? I think definitely there is. One thing we also have to keep in mind is that from a pure economic point of view, this is a large economic item for us in this community, so we can't just dismiss those economic benefits as well. So I think there's a way of having both, but right now there's just need to be more discussion to have both.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody here is dismissing the economic benefits at all, but just there has to be more conversation. Councillor Fraser.
All right, so I believe in responsible resource development. I think it's an important part of Alberta's economy, but what is the steps that have been taken to prevent consultation on land and water use is not responsible. Sacrificing the drinking water for potentially millions of Canadians, that's not responsible. Risking the health and future of our land for a volatile Chinese market, which we have already seen the damage that they can do when they decide to change direction on something. I'm just not sure that that is a responsible financial decision either. Nothing about this process feels responsible to me. I have seen no evidence of the technology that the UCP keep talking about. I've seen no evidence of it working anywhere in the world. I feel like we're being asked by the UCP, just trust us, we've got it under control. But we have evidence of time and time again where the government has failed to intervene, failed to apply their own regulations, failed to step in where that is their responsibility. This isn't responsible resource development, it's just not.
But there has not been a consultation period yet, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So that's what we're asking for.
Yeah.
So those questions then could be answered by the specialists, the scientists, the biologists in a proper forum. So, I mean, I'm getting all kinds of information thrown at me and I'm not capable of deciphering that information. So what we need to see is the proper consultation, and we're able to ask those questions, and the public is able to ask those questions and hopefully get the answers we're all needing. Councillor Phillips?
And I agree with the consultations need to happen for sure. And one thing that this process can help us and educate us in is what didn't work well in the past, what can work better in the future. So we can take some of those past mistakes and learn from them and make it better, and not just wordplay. Something that actually works. But I definitely think there needs to be more talk, more consultation. I'm with the same viewpoint as Mayor Burke. I don't have enough information on this particular topic to make a decision. We just need more consultation from all parties interested.
Okay. So I'm going to make a motion then. So be it resolved. I'm making this. So be it resolved that Council write a letter to the Honourable Premier Jason Kenney expressing the need for thorough process in considering coal mining in Alberta that at minimum includes extensive consultations with the public, First Nations, and industry. B, environmental impacts including land disruption, water quality, air quality, and potential health impact to both humans and wildlife. And cost and benefit analysis encompassing employment in the industry economic revenue, effect on tourism, and potential recreational development. And Councillor Brown, what else did you?
I just wanted to see that they enforce the ongoing activities that are in place at this time.
So-
Regulations.
Yeah,
Enforce those.
regulations enforced.
Yeah.
So D, to enforce ongoing regulations of current
I think
industry.
you can just leave it at regulations.
Enforce
the
ongoing-
regulations that are in place.
Okay, I'm good with that. Okay, does anybody have any more discussion around that or any comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of that motion to send a letter? And that's carried. Thank you. And I'm going to also ask for a motion, I guess, on to accept the presentations from Mr. Stelfox, Mr. Vesey, and Ms. McKenzie as information. Councillor Auld? All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. We'll go on to number 6.1, the RFD for criminal record checks. And I will turn that over to Ms. Hartling. Is that correct?
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. So as you were all aware, we've had a couple of presentations on the criminal record check. At the last council meeting, council requested that municipal comparisons, a spreadsheet providing statistics for 2019, 2020, and 2021, as well as some answers to council's questions be provided. So I did contact the detachment, and they provided some information which is attached to the report. Basically, I've reattached all the information, so the comparisons are still there, as well as some of the answers from the detachment. So I kind of went through some of the information, and I just wanted to point out that, basically for 2019, the volunteer versus employment record checks were approximately even. It was 47% volunteer versus 53% for employment that were received. For 2020 to 2021, there were significantly more employment record checks requested versus volunteer checks. Regarding the statistics for how many were employment versus volunteer that were not picked up, they were unable to provide statistics in that regard. However, there were 15%, roughly 15% that were destroyed. So when the criminal record checks are not picked up, they get destroyed, but they didn't keep track of how many were volunteer versus how many were employment. A couple of other notes just regarding some of the statistics they provided. In terms of how they're notified about pickups, they are notified at the time that they drop off the criminal record check that their checks will be ready in whatever it is, a couple of weeks or 10 days or whatever. And they're required to come and pick them up. So they don't follow up with an email. They don't follow up with anything. They just tell them at the time that they drop off that they'll be ready in a certain time period. They also suggest that they may want to call before they pick them up. They provided some information as to some of the duties of the clerks, and it gives you just basically a breakdown on the responsibilities that they have and where they indicated that time would be spent otherwise. And then really that's all of the information that I have for you. The specific details are contained in the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that council has.
Yeah, Mr. Krause?
Yeah, Mayor, if I can just follow up with Ms. Hartling's comments, and I guess this is coming more from my position. I guess I do have concerns with this request. One, I fully understand the workload on the RCMP clerks. Our staff face that every day too. But considering the economic time, we're putting an extra burden on people seeking employment and volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, this proposal from the RCMP, while it would benefit maybe a little lighter workload for them, it actually shifts the workload to administration. I mean, we would have an additional 100 people per month coming into this office. So just the concern from administration side.
Yeah, that's totally my concern as well. And I'm comfortable just to leave this status quo at this point. Councillor Narang?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to that, it's only 15%, and we were given sort of a different interpretation at the beginning of this process. And when you look at what is being destroyed, and yeah, just to echo what Dean said, or Mr. Pro said, we don't want barriers to employment when we're looking at what those numbers are. I don't see any value in, I don't see this decreasing any amount of workload, and yeah, I think it will in fact just be an increase.
Yeah, barriers to volunteering or employment, nothing. I really don't want us to see this. I think it was prudent that we researched this, and I think we have done, admin has done a really great job of doing that, but I'm comfortable with the status quo. Ms. Hartley?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to say the request did come, from the detachment, and we're, of course, here to provide as much information as we can to council, and for council to provide us some guidance from that point on. So thank you.
So I have Councillor Phillips and then Councillor Ault.
I do think this is something we should be looking at, only from the viewpoint of the numbers that aren't being picked up. When a service is free, people will say, well, you know what, I might be applying for a job, or I might be thinking of volunteering, so I'm just going to go to record check just in case I do this. So because there is no fee involved, it doesn't stop people from just going and getting one just because, and then these are probably the majority of the people that don't pick them up. And when we're looking at, I can't have the number in front of me, but I think it's around 138 to 160 per year that aren't being picked up. That's 4 solid, that's a month worth of one employee's work on a job that isn't being picked up. I just think there's got to be a way of reducing the number that aren't picked up. I definitely don't think having volunteers pay for a record check is something that we want to do. I think we want to keep the volunteers volunteering and not putting any roadblocks. But I think from an employment point of view, employees that are getting new jobs have to get certain tickets. They have certain education requirements they have to get, and a criminal record check is just one of those things that has to get put in place. I think it's something that we should, maybe not now with the economic times we're in, but maybe this is something we review again at the service level review.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was getting at. We look at it down the road. That's why I'm saying status quo at this point, and this is not a time to put barriers in front of people for employment or volunteering, financial barriers. So Councillor Auld?
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say, because the work is still going to get done. It's still adding a month onto their workload. It's still going to be there.
Yeah.
That money's just going to go into the revenue for the town. I don't have 100%. I think we just look at it at a later date and carry on.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I just have a problem supporting anything that adds to the workload of staff. They're already, facing an uphill climb with the work they do every day. And I think the problem that the RCMP are facing with these is more of an internal thing, that if there's controls that need to be put in place, maybe they should come within the RCMP and not administration.
Yeah, I tend to agree. It's back to that just shifting of where the work comes from. And yeah, maybe we've just brought an awareness also to this program, and it'll make people aware that it is a lot of work to do a criminal record check. And maybe that's part of the answer right there, just creating that awareness to say, hey, this does take time, and please remember to pick your criminal record check up. So Councillor Narang?
Yeah, like maybe there's some sort of marketing material or something, even just a poster that can be at the RCMP station, like please pick your stuff up, or I don't know, but just something like an awareness thing. But something, yeah, right? So that might be something that we could do to help them with.
Sure. Mr. Kraus, did you?
Sure, and Your Worship, and I think a lot of it is just the organizations themselves really thinking if they need a criminal record check.
Correct.
For example, this came to our attention, and we just had 10 summer students get hired, and typically we ask them for criminal record checks. But when we step back and go, you know, what are we gaining from getting criminal record checks for summer students? So we actually waived that requirement. So there's 10 criminal record checks
Right.
that won't happen now for the
So-
RCMP.
Again, it's back to that awareness, you know, maybe we've just always asked for them, but maybe organizations, I mean, I do realize they're important, I really do, but this is a prime example, so. Okay, so any other comments or questions? So we have some,
I can make the motion
Okay.
if you like.
Councillor Narang?
Make sure I make the right one. Be it resolved that council accept the report on fees for criminal record checks as information. Is that the one we're going?
Yep, is that your, yep. Any other comments? All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council.
So we'll move on to 7.1, the winter maintenance policy for the Rocky Mountain House Aerodrome.
Thank you, Your Worship. So as the airport manager, we brought this policy to the Airport Commission for consideration, and it went to their last meeting. It's the start of a process where we're going to start developing policies and procedures for the airport. So this was our first one that came to light this winter. It's just having a winter maintenance policy in place for staff to follow as a guideline and to accept or establish levels of service for the airport users. Like I say, I went to the Airport Commission at their last meeting, and they provided a recommendation to council to adopt the policy. They did make some minor revisions to it, which I think we had when it was 5 to 7 centimeters of snow, we just reduced it to one number to 7 centimeters. So just minor verbiage. So we are recommending to council to adopt the policy.
I don't have any questions. I know this was talked about at the airport meeting and I'm comfortable with that suggestion. So anybody else have any comments or questions? Councillor Ald?
Just regarding that meeting, there were no issues. I mean, it's perfect on it. Any issues with accepting that?
Okay. Councillor Phillips?
If there's no further discussion, I'd like to make a motion that council adopt the winter maintenance policy 007/2021 for the Rocky Mountain House Airport as presented and recommended by the Airport Commission.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thanks for doing that policy. Now I will move on to 7. Sorry, my computer. It's not going. You see me clicking. I'm not. It's nothing is happening. Okay, 7.2, the Creekside 40-kilometer speed pilot project. Mr. Schwader.
My senior peace officer Schmales will be joining us shortly, so he may just be walking in as I'm presenting. So I'm just reporting to council from direction from August 4th, 2020 in regards to a pilot project that we took on for 6 months starting September 1st in the Creekside subdivision. We put up 6 40-kilometer signs as well as a speed sign on 44th Avenue as you drive through Creekside. We did notify the residents via a letter on each door as far as the pilot project. We asked for comments then, but also we asked for comments on through the March 2021 newsletter, which we received, and it's in the package as far as the comments. As far as administration's recommending that we keep up the 40-kilometer signs presently until we decide what we want to do with the rest of the community. In regards to the speed sign stats, majority of on the average was between 32 to 34 kilometers where the speed sign was located. Granted, it was on a bit of a curve as you come down 44th, but the average speed was well below the 40 kilometers. As you can see, some of the comments that were sent in talked about the 30 down to a 30-kilometer type of speed limit, but As you can see, majority of the traffic was between 30 to 40 kilometers on that road. Financially for the whole community, there's a number in here that engineering and operations provided as far as the cost to do the rest of the community. A lot of it might be the awareness, bring attention to the residents of Rocky Mountain House in regards to if we decide to go with 40 kilometers. I do have a couple of alternatives and a recommended action. Is there questions in regards to the 40K?
Yeah, I think it's still timely to, and especially since we're paving, the rest of that paving project will be done this year. It'll be interesting to see the speed that happens on that little stretch, and hopefully they maintain the 40 kilometer there.
Right.
So, Councillor Phillips?
I don't have any concern with 40 kilometers through, through the residential streets and such. My concern is more on Highway 11A, River Road. I think a 40 kilometer speed limit on those roads may cause problems just because they're major arteries and major thoroughfares, as opposed to, side streets and things like that. Just the main arteries may have a problem with 40 kilometers.
Do we set the speed limit on
No, we don't. No, that's the province. Province that sets that. Councillor Brown and then Councillor Fraser.
Yeah, I was quite surprised and pleased to see the number of positive comments for lowering the speed to 30. That I thought proposing 40 might be a struggle, but obviously it's not. And as I mentioned in our previous discussion with this, I really am looking forward to the conversation about 40 kilometers throughout the rest of town.
Yeah, I agree. Councillor Fraser?
I was just going to ask, it's been a while since we discussed this. I thought the discussion was residential only, because we don't control the large collectors, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do believe, and Mr. Shanks may help me with this, but I think the arterial roads or collector roads would still say 50, like as far as 60th Street would still say 50. And when you branch off going to the east off of 60th, we would have to have 40 kilometer signs posted there as you come off the arterial or collector roads. And we've got to determine which roads those would be through the community.
But that would be a budgetary impact, right? To change all of those signs over. So that is why I think it's good to just be status quo and wait until budget and service level review. That would be my thought. But Councillor Phillips?
Yeah, I think, the service level review definitely is the place for conversation for this, but I'm glad to hear that, the arterial roads and River Road, that's the 50. Those are the roads that have the heavy traffic and have the long stretches, especially in front of Pudgy's, down Highway 11A and things like that. But definitely for the rest of the community, I think 40 is a good idea.
Okay, any other discussion around that? No? Okay, so we have a recommended action. Okay, Councillor Brown?
If there's no further discussion, I would like to move that be it resolved that council accepts this report for information and discusses at the next service level review meeting on how to proceed with additional 40 kilometer signage throughout the community.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Awesome. Thank you for that. Thanks for showing up, Brandon. Okay, we'll move on to number 8, correspondence for action. The Bowden Days Parade. I gotta say, it's kind of nice to see these invitations coming in because I'm hopeful that we're hopefully going to have some sort of more normalcy for the summer. So do we just, I guess that's a wait and see, right? Should we put that back on to come back later, do you think? Yeah. When we know more? Okay, so I'll make that motion just to have this come back to us, say the first meeting in, when is the parade again? July 17th. So the first meeting in June, we should know more by then. and we can decide who go at that point. Okay. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. So we'll move on to 8.2, the AUMA Economic Resiliency and Recovery Task Force final report. Did everybody get a chance to read this report? So this was the one, it was exciting to be part of this report, of this committee to work on this report. It was myself, a couple of other mayors, but there were a lot of other people, like the head of the Alberta Chambers was on this resiliency board task force. And there was a lot of really great conversation, and there are some great suggestions in this report. And I'm just thinking that we should send it to the Chamber of Commerce, and they can distribute that to their members. I think the more people, I guess that would be the best way. I don't know if we want to, would we add it to our website for businesses?
Your worship, we can. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
I think the better exposure, the more exposure this report gets, and if it can help anybody, more the merrier. So, okay, so just a motion then to have the AUMA Economic Resiliency and Recovery Task Force final report sent to the Chamber of Commerce and request that they distribute that to their members, and to put it on our town website. Okay, Councillor Fraser?
Can I also request on our social media channels as well,
Okay,
the link?
yep. Okay. Councillor Phillips?
I'll make that motion that we do that as presented.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. That was a fun task force, actually. There was so much great conversation. So moving on to 8.3, the Esoko and Friendship Center and Clearwater Regional CFSS request for letter of support for the Alberta Culture Days grant. I thought so. It kind of threw me off there for a minute. I started saying FCSS. Whoever tried to trick me up there, thanks. Okay. Who am I turning? I'm turning that over to Ms. Hartling.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we actually just received a letter. So for the cultural showcase this fall, they're requesting a letter of support to apply to Alberta Culture Days for Alberta Cultural Days funding. And that's a joint request from Esoko and Friendship Center and Clearwater Regional FCSS. The event will be taking place 3 days in September, come this fall. And that, of course, is, taking into consideration all COVID restrictions and regulations.
I think we're going to see a huge increase once these events do start opening up. So we should probably be prepared for a lot of crowds.
Yeah.
So just looking for a motion to send a letter of support. Councillor Narang?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried.
Thank you, Council, and your Worship and Council.
Okay. So we're on to correspondence for information. Just a motion to accept 9.1 to 9.12 as course for information. Councillor Fraser?
I will make that motion.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? Carried. Moving on to the CAO report. Mr. Kraus?
Thank you, Your Worship. It's before council. If council had any questions, but I think there's one activity after the report that I'd like to talk to council about or advise council of. So I became aware that in the RCMP detachment, our 14 officers on the municipal detachment is full. So we have all our officers on the municipal detachment. But on the provincial side, out of the 16, there's 6 vacancies. So there's only 10 RCMP on the provincial side. So I expressed the concern to Staff Sergeant Dinsdale because it's obvious that our municipal police portion is subsidizing the provincial side because they're so short on the provincial side. So I did receive a response from Sergeant Dinsdale that he'll ensure that any additional costs of our municipal police officers on the provincial side will be charged to the province. And that in the future, if there's so many vacancies, they'll shift officers from our municipal side to the provincial side to reflect more of the operational aspect that's going on and not put the financial burden strictly on the municipality for those shortages. So.
Yeah. Good catch. Yep. Councillor Auld?
How are you going to monitor that? How are we going to modify that?
Yeah, Your Worship, so they started doing quarterly reports showing their level of officers they have, and so I'll be monitoring through that, or maybe just a monthly email to Staff Sergeant Dinsdale, just ask him how it's going.
No.
I think that's great. That's fantastic. That's a good catch.
Okay. Any other comments on CAO report? No. Seeing none, I'll make a motion to accept the CAO report as presented. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, we'll move on to director's reports. Does anybody, okay. Mr. Ament, did you want?
No, unless you have any questions.
Yeah, okay. Anybody have any questions? I guess I do have one, if you want to come up, Mr. Ament. About the pool reopening, that's up and running right now?
Yes, the pool opened at noon today.
Okay,
So,
were there people booked?
yes.
Oh, good.
Yep, they were, our two staff came back last week. They were involved with setting the program and getting things ready. Unfortunately, some of the social media postings didn't happen until yesterday. They had planned to have that out late last week, but they had been receiving calls. We've received bookings. It's right now, those bookings are up on our Max Galaxy recreation schedules. The schools are booked solid, actually started today, and the schools are booked to the end of June.
Okay,
So
okay.
within the available slots that we do have available, so.
So how does that work? A school class can come in and how many students can be in there?
It's whatever their regular phys ed class would be. So they just are within the HS or the provincial regulations.
Okay,
School classes can use external facilities. We did have them coming using the ice surface for skating. Now they will be coming in and doing, some schools will choose to do lessons for their younger classes. Others will be doing more recreational swims based on the capacity of our two staff.
right, okay. That's great to hear. Any other questions for Mr. Ament? Okay, well, thanks very much. So we have corporate services report next. Does anybody have any questions for corporate services?
Your Worship, I think she has an announcement about an award.
That's correct, she does. Do you want to come up, Ms. Quinlan, and make that happy announcement? Thanks for reminding me, Dean.
So that is the annual report that I would say a team of us prepared last year. It basically is taking your financial statement and I think really trying to make it more readable to the public and give them more information so they can kind of look at the numbers but understand your operation. So we did submit it to the GFOA International, which is in the States. And yes, we just got notification yesterday that we were successful. Basically, to win the award, you have to meet all the criteria that they lay out. And it's not really easy, like it is a lot of work. And it was a very big group effort. So I would like to thank everybody that helped, even down to having to get our pictures taken. But no, it was really exciting to see. And yeah, Laura's already planning next year's or this year's. So yeah, it's something I think that we'll try to continue, but yeah, excited, happy with the staff that they're all pleased about it.
That's awesome. Thank you very much and congratulations. I know how much work went into that. So we
What's the
appreciate
title of the
all of your
award?
efforts. Title again is?
Oh, I'd have to look it up. It's The Canadian
Award for Financial Reporting.
Award for Financial Reporting. Yes, thank you.
So can we put that report back on our website again in the forefront so that people can see which report we're referring to?
Yeah. And you do get a plaque, and Laura's already trying to figure out where we should put it. And if you do, like when we do this year's report, once you win an award, you are also eligible. You can put the certificate on the front page of the annual report.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And
That's great.
I don't know if I could print it off, but you can go online, and there is a budget award, but it's a lot harder to get than the, but you can go online and you can look at Canadian and American towns and cities, and it'll show who in all of Canada gets those awards and how many years they've been getting them. So I could pull and see, what groups there are, because it is not everybody that does it, but it is kind of neat.
That's awesome. I had Councillor Phillips and Councillor Ald.
Congratulations to Betty, to you
well,
and your
thank you.
staff for sure. This is a tremendous accomplishment, and it's great that the ratepayers of Rocky Mountain House know that the money that they're paying is being well maintained, well taken care of, and has good, sound financial practices. So it's great that we're doing this. Thank you.
Councillor Ald.
I was just going to ask Betty, just as administration question, could you provide that report as far as in Canada? Who has actually received that award?
Yeah, no, I'll go
comparison.
pull the award information for Canada, and then you can see there's a few in Alberta. It's getting more common than it was, 5 or 6 years ago. More communities are starting to embrace it. And really the ultimate goal is to make it readable for
Yes,
our residents. And
absolutely.
It's trying to sort of put it into plain language, because James is coming in, but audited financial statements, they can be a little dry, so trying to make it a little more interesting. Anyways,
That's
thank
great.
you very much.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Brown had a question.
Yeah, congratulations to Betty, to you and your team, and everybody else that was involved in it. I know the documents you put together for us have helped me immensely, and I'm sure the citizens of this town will appreciate it. And I really think this is something that's very important, that the residents understand the quality of our financial management team. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure doing it.
Thanks. Any other questions? She just got right up and left. Okay, so we have planning and community development. Any questions? Are we going to follow up with Mr. Schwader?
It's tough to follow up. when you get to the board,
That's right.
but whatever.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Schwader? Do you have anything you'd like to?
Just one point in regards to, we were chosen for participating in the highway vicinity management
Okay.
project. We applied and we were chosen for that, so that's about the only real, well, I shouldn't say only real highlight, but as far as moving forward.
So what does that entail?
Well, ideally, we sit down with the other communities and we discuss, as far as proximity to the highway, whether we need to go through the process we're presently doing in regards to, say, if a house is built within 300 meters of the highway, do we need to get their approval, or for development like that, we just bless it ourselves?
So this would be sort of like a red tape reduction then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Councillor Fraser?
I was just curious how the patio program is going. I'm seeing lots of patios, so it's exciting.
The patios, of course, I was on holidays last week when it actually happened, but my staff took it upon themselves, and we're expediting patio applications when they come in, as long as they meet all the criteria. We're not throwing a whole lot of roadblocks in front of them. We're trying to make it work for everyone in regards to the land they're putting it on and their property and what they're actually using for a patio set. So yeah, it's been quite well received from the businesses within the community.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's awesome to see all the patios that have opened. It's fantastic, actually. So hopefully this will just keep happening even every spring.
Yeah, even if without the pandemic,
Yeah.
we would like to encourage people to put patios definitely on
Yeah.
on their properties. And a lot of businesses, even on Main Street, if you want to use a couple of stalls, that's possible as well on on actual Main Street if you want to use the sidewalks. But the sidewalks are wide enough that it can accommodate seating, but if they want to extend it, that's a possibility as well.
That's great to hear. That's great. Any other questions for Mr. Schwader? Well, thanks. Thanks for all that. I know it's a little bit more work, and I know the businesses appreciate everything that's happening, so with the patios. Okay, now we have engineering and operations. Anybody have any questions? Councillor Phillips?
I just have one question, just in regards to 54th Street
Just wait,
again.
we'll give them a second to get up there. They're trying to hide back in the corner.
So
Mr. Shanks.
just in regards to 54th Street, I see that we're waiting on CN still. Is it still for the parts that?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, and no timeline at all? Okay.
Nope. We don't anticipate it's going to go past the completion date, but we do have other options that we can still open up at, before the snow flies, which will be tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right. So when does the construction start back down there?
May. They're
May.
hoping mid-May.
Okay.
Weather's really good right now, so.
Yeah. Good, that's great. I'm
Yes.
so excited to be able to see that through. Yeah. Any other questions, Mr. Councillor Auld?
I did have a question about the presentation we had before about the selenium in the river, and we were talking about having to increase our sampling in the river anyway, and we were for the water intake and the water effluent. Are we set up that we can test our own water for that selenium to see what we're at down there now, or do we have to, is that something that we can find out as a baseline just in case things happen and change? And
I would have to get back to you with that one. I don't believe we are.
Your worship, I mean, we do send our water out to labs for testing. So we could probably do a special test of pulling river water and sending it to the same lab. I don't know what that would cost us, but I mean, that's something possible.
I think it'd be good to know.
Okay, so bring that back maybe at a future.
Yeah, we would have to check, make sure the lab would actually test for
Sure.
selenium, but
Okay, great. I don't have any other questions. Anybody else? Thanks, Mr. Shanks.
Just a couple
sorry.
items I'd like to just fill you in on. One is the organics program that we wanted to fire up at the end of May and June. We got notice yesterday that the totes won't be actually made until the end of May now.
Oh, darn.
So puts us definitely a month behind. We weren't impressed, but she's doing everything she can to continue that on.
Where are those totes made? Are they in Canada?
Quebec.
Oh, they, okay.
So no.
Randy.
The other item is under the capital projects. So the 47th Street, we received all our tenders back, and we had 6 companies that put in on that one. Urban is doing their recommendation today. I should have it tonight on which company we're looking at going with. It is under budget, so that's great to hear.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And what about the service road? Is there a service road that's being done as well?
Yes, we've got paving on the east side of Highway 11.
And
So
sidewalk, right?
Yes, the walking trail, actually.
Oh,
The
okay.
portion of the walking trail.
Hmm.
That's what we're working on.
Okay.
So we kind of had to change the original plans because we couldn't work with AT. They have different designs and regulations on how close you should be to the road.
Right.
In front of the Panago Pizza, I guess.
Okay.
We were trying to get on the sidewalk or on the business side of the service road, but it was going to take a portion out of the parking lots, which we thought that was not very fair to the business owners
Right.
there. So we're actually going to bump the walking trail over to the west side of the highway for
Oh,
the
so the
first
highway
block.
side. Okay.
Yeah. So on the Pepsi Cola sign. for that first stretch, and then it'll jump back over after the Fountain Tire
Oh,
and
good.
stay on the east side, on the business side, all the way down to the co-op.
Nice, okay,
Yeah.
that's great. Councillor Phillips?
Sorry, just a quick question. I know last year we had some projects that came in under budget and that freed up some money to add in some projects. Do you anticipate that that could happen again this year?
We're hoping so, but right now as it stands, the markets are skyrocketing. They've basically told us 7 to 14 days. They're going to have another percentage hike on piping and whatnot, and it's going to be brutal. So we got to jump on some of these projects right away.
Does the price of lumber affect any of your projects?
Not so much.
No? Okay.
No, just your piping, concrete work. Yeah.
Oh, did it? Okay. So hurry, get the appraisals back?
Yes.
Get the bids back?
Yes, we're trying.
Okay. Okay, I don't have any other questions. Anybody else? Kate, do you have anything else? Mr. Shanks? No? Okay, thanks very much. Okay, so just looking for motion to accept the director's reports as presented. Councillor Auld, all in favor? And that's carried. Can I just keep going, or is everybody okay? Yeah, okay. Action list. Does anybody have anything they would like to discuss on the action list? Okay. Seeing none, just a motion to accept the action list as presented. Councillor Phillips, all in favor? It's carried. And we have administrative inquiries. Does anybody have any administrative inquiries? No? I have one. It's about, we need to submit a response to the Alberta government on the EPR policy. And RCA has provided a response that we can also use as a reference to form our submission. So, question is, who's going to submit? Can I submit that?
Yeah, your worship, I mean, if council wants to take the lead on that submission, absolutely. Actually, you're probably the one who's most informed on EPR.
Okay.
So that's just registering, I think, through the provincial website on the survey.
Okay. And can I, if I needed help with admin, can I ask for admin help? Admin help?
Absolutely, your worship.
Okay. I think it's just really important. We've been pushing for EPR, so I do think we absolutely need to put a submission in. So, because I'm sure they'll be looking for that. So, Kate.
And that'll be from all of us then? That will be enough?
That will be as a municipal.
Submission from the town.
From the town. Okay. So do I need a motion to do that, or do we, it's just an admin inquiry, so I guess we'll just do that?
Your worship, I mean, it's part of our operations through the Eco Center, so I think we can just do it like administratively, just with
Okay.
your worship's assistance.
Sounds good. Okay. Everybody good with that? Okay. Does anybody have any notices of motion? Okay. Seeing none? Okay. It is 2:48. I'll call a break until 7. I'll call a 7-minute break since we'll take 7 minutes anyways. We'll come back at 2:55.